The grand ballroom of Blackthorne House shimmered beneath towering chandeliers, casting silver light across London's finest. Music drifted through the air like spun silk, couples gliding across polished floors as jeweled whispers danced between them. Yet at the far edge of the room, half hidden behind a marble pillar draped in ivy, stood Lady Evelyn Harrow, silent, steady, and invisible in her rose-coloured gown. At 25, Eveline had long since accepted her place, useful, dutiful, and easily forgotten. Tonight should have been her quiet victory. She was newly promised to Lord Adrian Blackthorne, the charming younger brother of England's most powerful duke. Nearly a duchess, her cousin murmured as she passed. Nearly. Eveline's fingers tightened around her fan. Then the music faltered only for a heartbeat as a hush rippled across the room. She looked up just as the crowd instinctively parted. A tall, imposing figure stepped through the entrance with a presence that froze conversation in its wake. Tristan Blackthorne, the Duke. Cold, calculating, untouchable. His storm-grey eyes swept the ballroom once and locked on Eveline. In that single moment, she felt her world shift subtle, sharp, and terrifying. Something was wrong. Terribly, irrevocably wrong. If you're captivated by this unfolding tale of dukes, danger, and forbidden desires, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Every episode dives deeper into the secrets, betrayals, and whispered passions hidden within Blackthorne House, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The morning arrived wrapped in mist and promise. Eveline Harrow sat before her vanity mirror, watching her maid's trembling fingers weave pearls through her dark hair. Through the window, street, Margaret's chapel bells tolled each chime a countdown to the moment she would become Lady Adrian Blackthorne. Nearly a duchess, she reminded herself. The phrase had become a quiet mantra these past weeks. "You look beautiful, my lady," whispered Mary, securing the final pin. Eveline studied her reflection. The ivory gown was perfection itself, Brussels lace cascading over silk, seed pearls catching the pale morning light. She looked exactly as a bride should, radiant, serene, hopeful. If only her hands would stop shaking. "It's time," her mother announced from the doorway, eyes bright with tears and triumph. "The carriages are waiting." The journey to the church passed in a blur of cobblestones and morning fog. Eveline clutched her bouquet of white roses, their thorns carefully removed, their scent cloying in the enclosed carriage. Safe flowers. Predictable. Much like the marriage she was about to enter. Adrian Blackthorne was kind, charming, easy. He told amusing stories at dinner parties and never looked at her with the intensity that made some gentlemen frightening. He would be a comfortable husband, a gentle one. It was more than most women could hope for. The church loomed ahead, its stone facade grey against the overcast sky. Guests had already arrived. She could see their carriages lining the street, horses stamping impatiently. Inside, London's elite waited to witness the union of the Harrow and Blackthorne families. Eveline's father helped her from the carriage, his grip firm on her elbow. "Steady now, this is your moment." But as they entered the church's shadowed vestibule, something felt wrong. The murmuring was too loud, too urgent. Guests turned in their pews, not with joy but with avid curiosity, the kind reserved for scandal, not celebration. Mrs. Pemberton's fan moved frantically. Lord Ashford leaned close to his wife, whispering behind his hand. "Where is he?" Eveline heard someone hiss. Her father's grip tightened. "Wait here." He strode toward the altar where the vicar stood wringing his hands. Eveline watched them confer in hushed, sharp tones. The vicar gestured helplessly. Her father's face darkened from pink to crimson. Minutes crawled past like hours. The whispers grew louder, more pointed. Eveline felt their weight pressing against her chest, crushing the air from her lungs. She understood in that terrible moment what it meant to be ruined. To stand alone before hundreds in a wedding gown with no groom to claim you. Adrian was not coming. Her mother appeared at her side, face pale as parchment. "Eveline, we must—" The great doors behind them suddenly opened. A rush of cold air swept through the church, guttering candles, and with it came a presence that commanded absolute silence. Eveline turned. Tristan Blackthorne entered like a storm given human form. The Duke strode down the aisle with measured, deliberate steps, his black morning coat immaculate, his expression carved from granite. No warmth touched those storm-grey eyes. No apology softened the hard line of his jaw. He stopped before Evelyn, towering over her, and the entire church seemed to hold its breath. "The wedding," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner, "will proceed as planned." Evelyn's heart stopped, but Adrian is not here. Each word fell like a judge's gavel. "I am." "Your Grace, this is highly irregular," the vicar began. Tristan's gaze cut toward him, silencing protest instantly. Then those terrible eyes returned to Eveline, and she saw something flicker in their depths, something that made her skin prickle with warning. "You have two choices, Lady Evelyn," he said quietly, meant only for her. "Walk down this aisle with me, or walk out in disgrace. Decide now." Behind her, London society watched, waited, hungered for her response. Evelyn looked at the Duke cold, commanding, unknowable, and felt her carefully planned future shatter like glass. She placed her trembling hand on his offered arm. "Then let us begin," she whispered, and walked toward an altar meant for one brother, claimed by another. The vows passed in a blur of liturgical words that meant everything and nothing at all. Evelyn heard her own voice respond at the proper moment, small, hollow echoes in the cavernous church. Tristan's answers came cold and precise, each syllable clipped as though the very act of speaking them caused him pain. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Tristan did not kiss her. He simply turned, offered his arm with the mechanical courtesy of a stranger hailing a hackney, and escorted her back down the aisle. The guests stared openly now, their shock ripening into delicious gossip that would fuel drawing rooms for weeks. Evelyn kept her chin high, her expression serene, even as humiliation burned through her veins like poison. Outside, a magnificent black carriage waited, the ducal crest gleaming gold against lacquered doors. Not the cheerful barouche she'd imagined riding in with Adrian, waving to well-wishers. This was a fortress on wheels. Tristan handed her inside without a word, then followed, taking the seat opposite rather than beside her. The door closed with a decisive click. Silence filled the space between them as the carriage lurched forward. Evelyn clutched her bouquet, its white roses already beginning to wilt. She wanted to speak, to demand explanations, to rage against the absurdity of what had just occurred. But one look at Tristan's face, hard as carved marble, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the window, and the words died in her throat. They travelled for hours. London gave way to countryside, green and rolling, impossibly beautiful beneath the afternoon sun. Evelyn had expected to spend her wedding day at Blackthorne's London residence, receiving guests, accepting congratulations. Instead, she was being taken somewhere else entirely. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible above the wheels. "Blackthorne Hall." 2 words, no explanation, no elaboration. "I thought we would remain in London for the season." "You thought incorrectly." The dismissal stung more than a slap. Evelyn bit the inside of her cheek, tasting blood, and turned to her own window. Fine. If he wished to play the tyrant, she would learn to be the silent, dutiful wife. She had practice enough at being invisible. By the time the carriage finally stopped, twilight had painted the sky in shades of purple and grey. Evelyn stepped out onto gravel and looked up. Blackthorne Hall rose before her like something from a Gothic novel, all dark stone and towering windows, ivy creeping up ancient walls like grasping fingers. It was beautiful in a forbidding way, more fortress than home. "Your Grace." An elderly woman in severe black appeared at the entrance, her keys jangling at her waist. "Welcome home. And to you, Your Grace," she added, eyes sliding briefly to Evelyn with an expression impossible to read. "Mrs. Redley," Tristan acknowledged. "Have the Duchess's chambers been prepared?" "As you instructed." He nodded once, then strode into the house without waiting for Evelyn. Mrs. Redley offered a thin smile. "If you'll follow me, Your Grace, I'll show you to your rooms." Her rooms, not their rooms. Evelyn followed the housekeeper through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, past portraits of stern-faced Blackthornes who watched with painted disapproval. The house felt alive with secrets, its very walls thrumming with unspoken history. Finally, Mrs. Redley opened a door. "The Duchess is sweet. Your trunks will arrive tomorrow. For tonight, we've provided necessities." The room was beautiful, all cream silk and polished mahogany, but unmistakably separate. Evelyn saw a door connecting to another chamber, presumably Tristan's, but it was firmly closed. "Will the Duke be joining me for dinner?" Evelyn asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Mrs. Redley's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "His Grace takes his meals in his study when in residence. A tray will be sent to you here." Of course, even on their wedding night, she would eat alone. "This house remembers everything, Your Grace," Mrs. Redley added quietly, almost as a warning. "Best remember that." Then she was gone, and Evelyn stood alone in a stranger's room, wearing a wedding gown meant for another bride, married to a man who could barely stand to look at her. She walked to the window and stared out at the darkening grounds. Somewhere in this house was her husband, cold, distant, unknowable, and she was utterly, completely trapped. 3 days passed in oppressive silence. Evelyn woke each morning to find breakfast laid out in her sitting room, toast growing cold, tea cooling in delicate china. She dressed herself, her trunks having arrived but no lady's maid appearing to assist her. She wandered the vast corridors of Blackthorne Hall like a ghost, present but unseen. Tristan remained invisible. She heard him sometimes footsteps in the corridor late at night, a door closing somewhere in the depths of the house, his voice giving curt orders to servants who scattered like startled birds at his approach. But he did not come to her, did not dine with her, did not acknowledge her existence beyond the legal fact of their marriage. On the 4th morning, restlessness drove her to explore more boldly. The east wing seemed older than the rest, its wallpaper faded, its carpets worn thin by generations of Blackthorne feet. Evelyn trailed her fingers along the panelled walls, feeling the house breathe around her the creak of settling wood, the whisper of draughts through hidden cracks. She found herself before a door slightly ajar. Evelyn hesitated, then pushed it open. The room beyond was clearly a study, shelves crammed with books, papers scattered across a writing desk, the faint scent of tobacco lingering in the air. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light from the window. This had been someone's sanctuary, recently abandoned. Adrian's, she realized with a jolt. This must have been Adrian's study before he what? Disappeared? Fled? She still had no answers. Evelyn stepped inside, drawn by curiosity and something sharper, the need to understand what had happened, why her life had been upended so completely. The desk drawers were mostly empty, but in the bottom one, hidden beneath old receipts and calling cards, she found them. Letters. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the first. The handwriting was careless, hurried. Asterisk. "The sum must be paid by month's end, or I cannot guarantee your safety. You know the consequences of default. Do not test me. Asterisk." No signature. But the paper was expensive, the seal broken but recognizable, a gambling house, one of the notorious ones in 7 Dials where gentlemen lost fortunes. The second letter was worse. Asterisk. "Adrian, for God's sake, stop this madness. You cannot continue down this path. The debts are too great. If you will not listen to reason, I will be forced to intervene. T. Asterisk." T. Tristan. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. She shuffled through more letters, demands for payment, threats barely veiled in polite language, and finally, one in Adrian's own hand, unsealed, never sent. Asterisk. "I cannot do this. I cannot marry her. Forgive me." Asterisk. The words blurred before her eyes. He had never intended to marry her at all. Adrian had planned to flee, to leave her standing at that altar, humiliated before all of London. The debts, the gambling, the desperation, it had all been building to this. And Tristan had known. "You should not be in here." Evelyn spun around, letters scattering from her hands. Tristan stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. He looked different than at the wedding, less controlled, his cravat loosened, dark hair disheveled, as though he'd been running his hands through it. Those grey eyes burned with something she couldn't name. I'm sorry, I was only snooping through private correspondence." He stepped into the room, and Evelyn instinctively backed against the desk. Did you find what you were looking for, Duchess? The title sounded like an accusation on his lips. I found the truth, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. Adrian was going to abandon me. These letters prove it. And now you know. Tristan's jaw clenched. Does that satisfy your curiosity? No. The word came out sharper than intended. It doesn't. You knew he planned to flee. You knew about the debts. Yet you said nothing. You simply appeared at the church and forced me into this marriage. Why? I saved you from ruin. You trapped me in this prison. Eveline's composure finally cracked. You don't speak to me. You avoid me as though I carry plague. You exile me to these rooms like a shameful secret. If you married me out of duty, if this was simply about preserving your family's honor, then why go through with it at all? Why not let the wedding be cancelled? Why chain yourself to someone you clearly despise? Something flickered across Tristan's face, raw and quickly suppressed. You know nothing of what you speak. Then explain it to me. Eveline's hands fisted at her sides. I deserve at least that much. Tell me why you did this. Tell me why Adrian ran. Tell me... Enough. The single word silenced her like a physical blow. Tristan turned toward the door, shoulders rigid with barely controlled tension. Adrian made his choices. I made mine. That is all you need to know. That is not enough, Eveline whispered to his retreating back. He paused at the threshold, not looking back. Stay out of locked rooms, Eveline. This house keeps its secrets for a reason. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with scattered letters and more questions than answers. Eveline could not sleep. She lay in her enormous bed, staring at the canopy above, replaying every word of their confrontation. Tristan's anger had been palpable, yes, but beneath it, she'd glimpsed something else. Pain, perhaps, or fear. Asterisk. You know nothing of what you speak. Asterisk. The words haunted her. Near midnight, she abandoned all pretense of rest, wrapped herself in a dressing gown, and slipped into the darkened corridors. The house settled around her with creaks and sighs, almost alive in the darkness. She wasn't looking for anything in particular. She simply needed to move, to think, to feel less trapped within the confines of her gilded cage. The library drew her like a lodestone. She'd glimpsed it days ago, a massive room lined floor to ceiling with books, leather spines gleaming in shades of burgundy and forest green. It smelled of old paper and beeswax, comforting in its timelessness. Eveline lit a single candle and ran her fingers along the shelves, reading titles in the flickering light. Poetry, philosophy, agricultural treatises, Gothic novels tucked apologetically between more serious works. She selected a volume of Byron and settled into a wing-back chair near the dying embers of the fireplace. You couldn't sleep either, Eveline gasped, nearly dropping the book. Tristan emerged from the shadows near the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He wore no jacket, only shirt sleeves and waistcoat, looking almost human without his usual armor of formal dress. I didn't see you there, she managed, heart still racing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. It's your house, too. He took a slow sip of what she assumed was brandy. Technically, the word hung between them, heavy with implication. Silence stretched. Eveline expected him to leave, to retreat as he always did. Instead, he moved closer, settling into the chair opposite hers. The firelight caught the sharp planes of his face, softening them slightly. Byron? He nodded toward her book. Interesting choice. You disapprove? I didn't say that. The ghost of something amusement perhaps touched his lips. Though I would have taken you for a devotee of Miss Austen. Something more. Proper. You don't know me well enough to make such assumptions, Your Grace. Tristan. The word came quietly. When we're alone, you may call me Tristan. It felt like a gift, however small. Eveline carefully marked her page. Very well, Tristan, and you should know I find Byron's cynicism refreshing. All that passionate despair, it feels honest in a way polite society rarely allows. He studied her with those penetrating grey eyes, and for the first time since their disastrous wedding, he truly looked at her. Not through her, not past her, but at her. You're angry, he said finally. Shouldn't I be? Yes. He swirled the brandy in his glass, watching the liquid catch the light. You have every right to your anger. This is not the life you chose. Nor the husband. Something flickered across his face. Was it hurt? Regret? It vanished too quickly to name. No, he agreed quietly, not the husband. Evelyn leaned forward slightly. Then help me understand. Please, Adrian was going to leave me ruined. Those letters made that clear. You stepped in to prevent a scandal. But why like this? Why marriage? Surely there were other ways to salvage the situation. Tristan was silent for a long moment, shadows playing across his features. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weariness she hadn't heard before. Adrian is charming. Everyone loves Adrian, his easy smile, his careless grace, his ability to make people feel delighted in his presence. He paused. But charm is often a mask for weakness, and my brother's weakness nearly destroyed more than just himself. The gambling debts were catastrophic, not just to him but to the duchy, to our family name, to every tenant and servant who depends on Blackthorne's stability. His jaw tightened. I spent months trying to rein him in, to make him see reason. He promised to stop, promised to honor his commitment to you. Instead, he planned to flee to the continent the morning of your wedding. So you took his place to protect your family's honor. No. The word came sharp, almost angry. Tristan set down his glass and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, suddenly closer. I took his place to protect you. The air between them shifted, charged with something electric and dangerous. From scandal? Eveline whispered. From him. Tristan's eyes locked on hers, intense and unflinching. Adrian doesn't love you, Eveline. He chose you because you were quiet, biddable, easily managed. A convenient solution to the pressure I placed on him to marry. If he hadn't run, he would have made you miserable, gambled away your dowry, humiliated you with mistresses, blamed you for his unhappiness. The truth of it struck like a physical blow. She'd known, hadn't she? On some level, she'd known Adrian saw her as easy, forgettable, safe. And you? Her voice barely carried across the space between them. What do you see when you look at me? Tristan went very still. The firelight reflected in his eyes, making them seem almost molten. That, he said slowly, is a dangerous question. I'm tired of safe answers. For a heartbeat, she thought he might close the distance between them. His gaze dropped to her lips, then away, and she felt the loss of it like winter wind. You should return to your chambers, he said, his voice rough. It's late. But he didn't move. Neither did she. And in that moment, sitting in the firelit library with Byron forgotten in her lap, Eveline understood something terrifying. The cold Duke wasn't cold at all. He was burning and desperately trying not to let her see the flames. The next morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, sunlight streaming through Eveline's windows like a promise. She woke feeling different, lighter somehow, as though the previous night's conversation had shifted something fundamental between her and Tristan. For the first time since arriving at Blackthorne Hall, she took breakfast in the morning room instead of her chambers. Tristan was already there, reading correspondence over coffee, and when she entered, he stood. A small gesture, but meaningful. Good morning, she offered tentatively. Good morning. His eyes met hers briefly, and she saw it acknowledgement of what had passed between them in the library. I trust you slept well? Better than previous nights. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. They ate in companionable silence, and Eveline felt hope unfurling in her chest like spring blossoms. Perhaps this marriage need not be a prison. Perhaps, given time, they might find their way to something resembling partnership. Perhaps even more. The sound of hoofbeats on gravel shattered the moment. Tristan's head snapped toward the window, his entire body going rigid. Eveline followed his gaze and saw a rider dismounting in haste, leaving his horse to a startled groom. Even at a distance, she recognized him. Adrian. Stay here, Tristan commanded, already rising. But Eveline was done with being ordered about. She followed him into the entrance hall just as the doors burst open. Adrian Blackthorne looked nothing like the charming gentleman who'd courted her in London. His golden hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled from travel, his blue eyes wild with something between desperation and rage. "You bastard!" he spat at Tristan. "You absolute bastard!" Adrian. Tristan's voice could have frozen fire. "You are not welcome here." Not welcome? In my own home? Adrian laughed, sharp and bitter. Of course not. You've taken everything else. Why not that too? You forfeited your right to this house when you chose to run like a coward. I chose. Adrian's voice rose to a shout. You gave me no choice. You orchestrated everything just as you always do. The debts, the pressure, the impossible expectations. The debts were yours, brother, as was the choice to gamble away your inheritance. Adrian's gaze swung to Eveline, and she saw something dark flicker in his expression. Eveline, my God, what has he done to you? Lord Adrian. Has he told you? Adrian moved closer, ignoring Tristan's warning growl. Has my dear brother explained why he really took my place at that altar? Eveline's heart began to pound. He told me you planned to flee, that you never intended to marry me. Is that what he said? Adrian's smile was cruel. How noble of him, the Duke as savior rescuing the poor abandoned bride. That's enough. Tristan's voice cut like a blade. But Adrian wasn't finished. He circled Evelyn slowly, like a predator assessing prey. Did he tell you he's wanted you since the moment I introduced you? That he watched you at every ball, every dinner party, every garden stroll we took together? Evelyn felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Did he mention that he's the one who called in my debts early? That he's the one who made it impossible for me to stay, knowing full well what would happen when I couldn't pay? You're lying, Evelyn whispered, but her voice wavered. Am I? Adrian turned to his brother, triumph gleaming in his eyes. Tell her, Tristan. Tell her you didn't systematically destroy my ability to marry her so you could have her for yourself. Your debts destroyed you, Tristan said coldly. I merely refused to enable your self-destruction any longer. By taking my bride? She was never truly yours. The admission hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Adrian's laugh was harsh, humorless. Finally, the truth. He didn't marry you to save you, Evelyn. He married you to punish me. You're just another pawn in our family's endless game of chess, another piece he's stolen from the board. Evelyn looked between the brothers, Adrian's bitter triumph, Tristan's carefully blank expression, and felt something crack inside her chest. Is it true? She asked Tristan quietly. Did you call in his debts, knowing what would happen? Tristan's jaw worked, but he said nothing. Did you want me before all of this? Still, silence. The answer in his non-answer was damning. I see. Eveline's voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant and cold. Adrian is right. I am merely a pawn, something to be won or lost between you. That's not... Tristan started. Don't. She held up a hand, surprised by its steadiness when everything inside her trembled. Please don't insult me with explanations now. She turned toward the stairs, desperate to escape before either man could see her shatter. Eveline, wait. But she didn't wait. She couldn't. Behind her, she heard Adrian's parting shot, delivered with vicious satisfaction. Well done, brother. You won her hand. But I wonder, did you ever consider you might lose her heart? Evelyn climbed the stairs with measured steps, her composure held together by sheer will. Only when she reached her chambers and locked the door did she finally allow herself to break. She had been right all along. She was invisible, useful, easily forgotten. A prize to be claimed, a scandal to be prevented, a piece moved across a board in a game between brothers. But never, ever simply herself, wanted for her own sake. The hope she'd felt that morning, fragile and tentative, died cold in her chest. And with it, something harder took root. Anger. Evelyn refused to leave her chambers for 2 days. Meals arrived on trays untouched. Mrs. Redley knocked periodically, offering concern in her quiet way, but Evelyn sent her away. She wanted solitude, needed it. The alternative was facing Tristan, and she didn't trust herself not to scream or weep or both. On the 3rd morning, he came. She heard his footsteps in the corridor, measured, deliberate, then the knock. Not tentative like Mrs. Redley's, but firm, commanding. Evelyn, open the door. She remained in her chair by the window, watching clouds drift across grey skies. I know you're in there. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. A pause, then listen, please. The please surprised her. She'd never heard that word from his lips before, not directed at her. It sounded unpracticed, almost painful. Against her better judgment, she opened the door. Tristan looked haggard. His cravat was crooked, shadows bruised beneath his eyes, his jaw dark with stubble. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, and perhaps he hadn't. "May I come in?" She stepped aside wordlessly. He entered, and she noticed his hands were not quite steady. The great Duke of Blackthorne, always so controlled, was barely holding himself together. "Good," she thought viciously. "Let him suffer as I have." "Adrian is gone," Tristan said abruptly. "I sent him away with enough money to settle elsewhere. He won't return." "How efficient of you." He flinched at her tone. "Eveline." Was any of it true? She crossed her arms, armor against the ache in her chest. "Did you manipulate his debts? Did you want me before Adrian courted me? Was this marriage truly about saving me, or was it about winning some twisted game between brothers?" Tristan was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "Yes." The single word landed like a stone in still water. Yes, to which part? She needed to hear him say it. All of it. All of it. He dragged a hand through his hair, destroying what remained of its order. "Adrian introduced you at Lady Pemberton's garden party. You were standing by the roses, laughing at something your cousin said. You had this smudge of dirt on your glove from touching the flowers, and you were trying to hide it. I thought—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I thought you were the most alive person I'd ever seen." Eveline's breath caught, but she refused to soften. "So you let your brother court me?" "Because I had to." Frustration leaked into his tone. "I'm a duke, Eveline. Duty comes first, always. Adrian needed to marry, needed stability, needed someone who might actually make him want to be better. You seemed perfect for him, kind, patient, steady. I told myself it was the right thing, the logical thing. But you wanted me." "Yes." The word came like a confession torn from him. "God help me, yes. Every time he brought you to dinners, every time you sat across from me making polite conversation, every time he touched your hand, I wanted to break something. But wanting isn't enough. It never has been. I am the Duke. I do what must be done, not what I wish to do." "So you called in his debts?" Tristan's eyes closed briefly. "I didn't. It's more complicated than Adrian made it sound. His creditors were becoming dangerous. One threatened violence if payment didn't come. I bought the debts to protect him, then gave him time to settle them. Months. But he kept gambling, kept losing, kept lying to everyone, including you. And when you realized he would run?" I panicked. The admission seemed to cost him. I knew if he left you at that altar, your reputation would be destroyed. Your family would suffer. You would suffer. And the thought of you enduring that humiliation because of my brother's weakness, his hands clenched into fists. I couldn't allow it. So you took his place. Yes. To save me, or to have me. The question hung between them, sharp as broken glass. Tristan met her eyes, and what she saw there stole her breath raw, unguarded truth. "Both," he whispered. "I told myself it was duty, that I was being noble, sacrificing myself to protect you. But the truth is I seized the opportunity. I stood at that altar and bound you to me, knowing you deserved better, knowing I was being selfish, knowing that every moment you spend trapped in this marriage to a man who doesn't know how to be anything but cold and controlled is a moment stolen from the life you should have had." Tears burned behind Eveline's eyes, but she blinked them back. "You should have told me. From the beginning, you should have told me everything." "I know. You should have given me a choice." "I know," his voice cracked. "But if I had, you would have chosen scandal over me, and I couldn't bear that. I couldn't bear watching you walk away. So instead, you let me believe I was nothing but a convenient solution. You avoided me, ignored me, left me alone in this house to think myself worthless. Because touching you would have been torture." The words burst from him like a dam breaking. "Because every time I see you, I want things I have no right to want. Because if I allowed myself one moment of weakness, one honest word, I would fall at your feet and beg you to forgive me for being the selfish bastard who trapped you in this nightmare of a marriage." Eveline stared at him, this powerful man unraveling before her eyes. "I am sorry," Tristan continued, his voice dropping to something barely audible, "for all of it. You deserved better than Adrian's charm and my cold manipulation. You deserved to be chosen freely, loved openly, cherished as you should be. Instead, you're chained to me, and I have no idea how to be anything other than what I am." Silence settled between them, heavy with confession and consequence. Eveline's anger remained, but it had shifted into something more complex, still sharp, but edged now with understanding, with reluctant empathy. "I need time," she said finally, "to think, to process what you've told me." He nodded once, accepting the dismissal. "Of course." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth," he said without looking back, "you were never a pawn, never just a prize. You've always been, you are—" He stopped, seeming to wrestle with words. "You're everything, Eveline. That's the problem. You always have been." Then he was gone, and Eveline stood alone with the ruins of her anger and the dangerous, terrifying seed of something else beginning to grow in its place. Days passed in strange limbo. Eveline emerged from her self-imposed exile, but the house felt different now, charged with unspoken words and weighted glances. She and Tristan existed in careful orbit around each other, sharing meals in near silence, passing in corridors with polite nods. But something had changed. His confessions had cracked open a door neither seemed willing to fully close or walk through. She caught him watching her sometimes when she played the pianoforte in the music room, when she walked the gardens in the cool morning air, not with possession, but with something far more dangerous, longing. And heaven help her, she found herself watching back. A week after their confrontation, Adrian's letter arrived. Mrs. Redley brought it to Eveline with obvious reluctance, her mouth pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "This came for you, Your Grace. I thought you should see it before His Grace returns from the tenants' meeting." Eveline broke the seal with trembling fingers. The words swam before her eyes as she read, each sentence landing like a physical blow. Asterisk, dearest Eveline. Asterisk. Asterisk, I write to you now in hopes that you will forgive my outburst. You deserved better than my rage, and certainly better than the half-truths both Tristan and I have fed you. Asterisk. Asterisk. My brother told you he bought my debts to protect me. What he didn't tell you is why those debts existed in the first place. Asterisk. Asterisk. Our father left the duchy in shambles, mismanaged estates, failed investments, crushing obligations. When he died, Tristan inherited not wealth but ruin. He spent years rebuilding what father destroyed, sacrificing everything to restore the Blackthorne name. Asterisk. Asterisk. Including his chance at happiness. Asterisk. Asterisk. Father had arranged a match for Tristan, a love match actually, Lady Caroline Ashford. They were devoted to each other. But her dowry was modest, and when father died, Tristan was forced to choose, marry for love and watch the duchy crumble, or break the engagement and pursue a wealthy heiress. Asterisk. Asterisk. He chose duty. Caroline married another. Tristan became exactly what duty demanded, cold, controlled, alone. Asterisk. Asterisk. I resented him for it. For his perfection, his sacrifice, his endless responsibility. So I rebelled. I gambled. I drank. I squandered money we didn't have. Every debt was a rebellion against his control, against the suffocating weight of duty he wore so easily. Asterisk. Asterisk. When he pressured me to marry, I chose you specifically because I knew I saw how he looked at you, how he tensed when you laughed at my jokes, how his jaw clenched when I took your hand. For once, I had something he wanted. It was petty, cruel, but God, it felt like winning. Asterisk. Asterisk. Then the debts came due, and Tristan offered me a choice. Marry you as planned, or run and let him clean up the mess. I chose to run because I wanted to see him suffer. Wanted him to watch you be humiliated, knowing he could have prevented it if he'd just admitted. He wanted you for himself. Asterisk. Asterisk. But he didn't let you suffer, did he? He took my place because that's what Tristan does. He sacrifices, even his own happiness, even his pride. Asterisk. Asterisk. You asked if he manipulated events to have you. The truth is worse. He manipulated events to give you the life you deserved, even though it meant binding himself to a loveless marriage with a woman who would never see him as anything but the cold duke who trapped her. Asterisk. Asterisk. He doesn't know I'm writing this. He would be furious if he did. But you deserve the whole truth, Eveline. Asterisk. Asterisk. My brother is not a villain. He's a man who's spent his entire life doing what's right instead of what he wants. And for the first time, he wanted someone so desperately that he broke his own rules to have it, even knowing it would destroy any chance of your affection. Asterisk. Asterisk. That's not manipulation, that's tragedy. Asterisk. Asterisk. I've been the villain in this story, not him. I won't ask your forgiveness because I don't deserve it, but please don't punish Tristan for being human enough to want you. Heaven knows he's punished himself enough. Asterisk. Asterisk. Yours in regret. Asterisk. Asterisk. Adrian. Asterisk. Eveline read the letter 3 times, tears streaming unchecked down her face. Lady Caroline Ashford. A broken engagement. Years of sacrifice. Tristan had already given up love once for duty, and then he'd seen her and broken. The door opened and Tristan entered, stopping short when he saw her face. What's wrong? What happened? Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. She watched his expression shift as he read from confusion to recognition to barely suppressed fury. The paper crumpled in his fist. That meddling, he bit off the curse. Eveline, you must understand, Adrian twists everything to suit his narrative. Is it true about Lady Caroline? His jaw worked. That was years ago. It's irrelevant. Is it true that you broke an engagement to marry for duty? Yes. The word came hard. But that has nothing to do with... It has everything to do with this. Eveline's voice cracked. You let me believe I was just a pawn when you've been sacrificing your happiness for duty your entire life. You let me think you were cold when you've simply been broken, don't you see? I can't... She choked on the words, pressing her hands to her face. I can't breathe here anymore, Tristan. I can't exist in this house with all these secrets and sacrifices and half-truths. I can't be another item on your list of duties, another obligation you bind yourself to while slowly dying inside. You're not. I am. The words burst from her. I'm your wife because Adrian ran, because duty demanded it, because you decided what was best for everyone without consulting me. And now I discover you've been doing this martyring yourself for years. How can I stay knowing every moment with you is just another sacrifice you're making? Because I want you here, Tristan said desperately, moving toward her. Not out of duty, not out of obligation. I can't be what you want. Eveline backed away, shaking her head. I can't be another person you give up everything for while pretending it doesn't cost you. I won't watch you destroy yourself for me the way you did for your family, for the duchy, for Caroline. Then what do you want from me? The rawness in his voice stopped her. Tell me what I can do to fix this. I'll give you anything: freedom, distance, a separate residence. Just tell me what you need. I need to leave. The words fell into terrible silence. Leave, he repeated flatly. I need to go home. To my family. To somewhere I can think without feeling like I'm drowning in your sacrifices and my own inadequacy. You're not. He stopped, visibly grappling with control. How long? I don't know. Something in his face shuttered, that cold mask sliding back into place. But his eyes were devastated. Of course, he said quietly. I'll have a carriage prepared. Tristan? No. He held up a hand. You're right. You need space. Time. I won't. His voice caught. I won't trap you further. He turned and walked to the door, spine rigid, shoulders squared, every inch the controlled duke. But at the threshold he paused. I'm sorry, he whispered, for all of it, but mostly for making you feel like anything less than everything. Then he was gone, and Eveline collapsed into a chair, sobbing for the man who'd given up love twice and might have just lost it a third time. Eveline's childhood home felt smaller than she remembered. Her mother fussed over her arrival with poorly concealed anxiety, asking no questions but clearly bursting with them. Her father retreated to his study, granting her the space she needed. Even her younger sister, Charlotte, seemed to sense something profound had broken and kept her usual chatter to sympathetic murmurs. 3 days passed in a fog of routine, morning walks in familiar gardens, afternoon tea with her mother's silence speaking louder than words, evening dinners where everyone pretended nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. Evelyn had thought distance would bring clarity. Instead, she found herself replaying every moment with Tristan, his confessions, his restraint, the longing in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. Adrian's letter haunted her. Asterisk. That's not manipulation, that's tragedy. Asterisk. She'd fled Blackthorne Hall convinced she was saving herself from becoming another obligation in Tristan's endless list of sacrifices. But now, alone in her childhood room, she wondered if she'd actually been running from something else entirely. From her own feelings. From the terrifying possibility of being loved, truly, desperately loved by a man who'd spent his life denying himself everything he wanted. On the 4th morning, her sister burst into her room, breathless. "Evie! He's here!" Evelyn's heart stopped. "Who?" "The Duke. He's downstairs asking to see you. Mama is having palpitations. Father looks like he's considering his pistol collection. You have to come down immediately." Evelyn's hands trembled as she smoothed her dress. She'd imagined this moment practiced what she might say, but now that it was here, every prepared word fled her mind. She descended the stairs slowly, each step feeling momentous. Tristan stood in the entrance hall, looking utterly out of place among the modest furnishings. He wore no greatcoat despite the autumn chill. His jacket was wrinkled, his cravat barely tied. He looked like he'd ridden hard and fast, without stopping. When he saw her, something raw flashed across his face before he schooled it away. "Your Grace," he said formally, too formally, "thank you for seeing me." "Perhaps you'd prefer the drawing room," her mother suggested nervously. "Some tea?" "Thank you, Mrs. Harrow, but no." Tristan's eyes never left Evelyn. "I won't take much of your daughter's time. I only need a moment." Her father appeared from his study, face stern. "Duke Blackthorne, I must say this situation is highly irregular." "I know, sir. I apologize for the intrusion." Tristan's voice carried a weariness that made Evelyn's chest ache. "But I needed to speak with my wife, if you'll permit it." The word wife hung in the air, laden with everything unsaid. Her father looked at Evelyn, silently asking her wishes. She nodded once, and he retreated with her mother and sister, though they left the door conspicuously ajar for propriety's sake. Silence stretched between them. "You look well," Tristan said finally. "You don't." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, I suppose I don't." "Why are you here, Tristan?" He took a breath, and she saw his hands tremble before he clenched them into fists. "I came because I realized something after you left. Something I should have understood long before I stood at that altar and claimed you." "What's that?" "That I've spent my entire life doing what I was supposed to do instead of what I wanted to do. I broke my engagement to Caroline because it was responsible. I took on crushing debt to save the duchy because it was my duty. I became cold and controlled because that's what a duke must be." He paused, his jaw working. "And I married you, telling myself it was to save you, to protect you, to do the right thing." "Tristan, let me finish, please." His voice cracked on the please. "The truth is, I married you because the thought of you belonging to anyone else, even my own brother, made me want to burn the world down. I married you because I'd spent months watching you smile at Adrian and wishing, just once, you'd smile at me that way. I married you because I was selfish and desperate and so damn tired of sacrificing everything I wanted for what I was supposed to want." He took a step closer, and Evelyn saw tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. "You said you couldn't be another sacrifice, another duty I bind myself to, and you were right, I have spent my life sacrificing. But Evelyn, you were never a sacrifice. You were the first selfish thing I'd ever allowed myself to want, the first time I chose desire over duty, the first time I was willing to be called a villain if it meant having you. Then why did you push me away?" Her own voice broke. "Why did you avoid me, ignore me, leave me alone in that house feeling unwanted?" "Because I was terrified." The confession seemed torn from him. "Terrified that if you saw the depths of what I felt, you'd be frightened, or worse, disgusted. I'm not charming like Adrian. I don't know how to be soft or easy, or anything other than what years of duty have made me. I thought if I kept my distance, you'd eventually find some contentment, some peace. Instead, I felt like a prisoner. I know. He closed his eyes briefly. I know, and I am so deeply sorry. He dropped to one knee. Evelyn gasped. Tristan, what are you? I'm doing what I should have done from the beginning. He looked up at her, pride stripped away, leaving only raw honesty. I'm asking, not commanding, not manipulating, not deciding what's best for everyone without consulting you. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, his touch warm and surprisingly gentle. Evelyn Harrow Blackthorne, you are not an obligation, not a sacrifice, not a duty or a prize or a piece in anyone's game. You are the woman who makes me want to be more than the cold duke. The woman who sees past my armor to the man beneath. The woman I fell in love with the moment you laughed at Lady Pemberton's garden party with dirt on your gloves and stars in your eyes. Tears spilled down Evelyn's cheeks. I'm asking you now, truly asking, will you give me another chance? Not to be your husband by force or circumstance, but to earn the right to be your husband in truth. To court you properly, to prove that you're not just wanted but cherished. I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll give you all the time and space you need. But please, don't give up on us, because I was too much of a coward to be honest about what you mean to me. He pressed his lips to her knuckles, and she felt them tremble against her skin. I love you, Evelyn. Not because I should, not because it's convenient, but because you're you, and I can't imagine a life worth living without you in it. In the doorway, her mother stifled a sob. Evelyn looked down at this powerful man kneeling before her, vulnerable, honest, offering not commands but pleas. The Duke who'd built walls around his heart was tearing them down, brick by painful brick. Stand up, she whispered. Uncertainty flickered across his face, but he obeyed. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, feeling the rough stubble, the tension in his jaw, the barely controlled hope in his eyes. I don't want another chance, she said softly. She felt him start to pull away, to accept rejection with the same stoicism. He accepted everything. I want a real beginning, with honesty, with choice, with love. His breath caught. Take me home, Tristan, to Blackthorne Hall, and this time I'll walk through those doors as your wife, not by accident, but by choice. Evelyn. She rose on her toes and kissed him, gentle and sure, tasting salt from tears his or hers. She couldn't tell. When they parted, he was smiling, truly smiling, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger, lighter, free. I'll spend the rest of my life earning this, he promised. Good, she whispered against his lips. I'm counting on it. They returned to Blackthorne Hall together. This time, when the carriage rolled up the long drive, Evelyn felt no dread. Tristan sat beside her, not across from her, their hands intertwined, his thumb tracing absent circles on her palm as though reassuring himself she was real. Mrs. Redley waited at the entrance, and when she saw them together, truly together, her stern face softened into something resembling approval. Welcome home, Your Grace, she said to Evelyn, and this time the title felt earned. That evening, Tristan came to her chambers as dusk painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. He knocked softly, waiting for permission that once he would have assumed was his right. Come in, Evelyn called. He entered, and she saw nervousness in the set of his shoulders. This man who commanded lords and managed estates worth fortunes was nervous about being alone with his own wife. I thought we might dine together, he said, if you'd like, in the small dining room, not the formal one, unless you'd prefer. Tristan. She crossed to him, taking his hands. Breathe. We're starting fresh, remember? No more walking on eggshells. I find myself unsure of how to do this, he admitted quietly. How to simply be with you, without duty or obligation or fear between us. Then we'll learn together, she smiled, starting with dinner. I'm famished. They ate in the small dining room, just the two of them, and for the first time conversation flowed naturally. He told her about the estates, the tenants he'd visited that morning, a particularly stubborn sheep that had escaped its pen 3 times. She shared memories of her childhood, her dreams of writing poetry, her secret love of Gothic novels. "I knew about the novels," he confessed with a slight smile. "I saw Byron in your hands that night in the library." "And judged me for it?" "And fell a little more in love with you for it." The words came easier now, more natural, as though speaking his feelings aloud had released something long locked away. After dinner, he walked her through the gardens in the moonlight, pointing out constellations, telling her the history of Blackthorne Hall, not the grand political history, but the small human moments, where his mother had planted roses, where he and Adrian had played as boys, before rivalry poisoned their brotherhood. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" Evelyn asked, thinking of Adrian's letter. "Perhaps, someday, when enough time has passed." Tristan paused by the fountain, its water silver in the moonlight. He was right, you know. In his letter, "I had become so consumed with duty that I forgot how to want anything for myself. He rebelled because I never did." "You're not responsible for his choices." "No, but I am responsible for mine." He turned to face her fully. "Which brings me to something I've been planning." "Oh?" "I know we're already married. Legally, socially, in every way that matters to the world." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small velvet box. "But I want to do this properly, the way I should have from the beginning." He opened the box to reveal a ring not ostentatious, but beautifully crafted. A sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, the deep blue catching moonlight like captured sky. "This was my grandmother's," he said softly, "not part of the duchy's collection, just hers. She told me once to give it to someone I loved, not someone I had to marry. I want you to have it, Evelyn, not because you're the Duchess of Blackthorne, but because you're you." Tears pricked her eyes as he slipped it onto her finger beside the plain gold band from their hasty ceremony. "And tomorrow," he continued, "if you're willing, I'd like to marry you again, properly, just us, the vicar, and Mrs. Redley as witness, no society watching, no scandal forcing us. Just two people choosing each other." "A real wedding," Evelyn whispered. "A real wedding, where you walk to me freely, not because you have no other choice, but because you want to." She looked at the ring on her finger, then up at this man who'd torn down every wall protecting his heart. "Yes," she said simply, "yes to all of it." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Evelyn dressed in a simple gown of pale blue, no elaborate silk, no crushing expectations, just a dress that made her feel beautiful. Mrs. Redley arranged wildflowers in her hair, her efficient hands surprisingly gentle. "He's a good man, Your Grace," the housekeeper said quietly. "This house has been cold for too long. Thank you for bringing warmth back to it." The small chapel on the estate grounds was empty, except for the vicar and Mrs. Redley. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting the stone floor in jeweled colors. And there, waiting at the altar, was Tristan. He wore no formal regalia, just a simple morning coat, his cravat perfectly tied for once, his eyes fixed on the door as though afraid she might not come. When she appeared, his entire face transformed with relief and joy and love so profound it stole her breath. This time, she walked down the aisle slowly, savoring every step, not rushing toward obligation, but choosing this man, this life, this love. When she reached him, he took her hands, and she felt them tremble. "I was afraid," he whispered, meant only for her, "that you'd change your mind." "Never," she promised. The ceremony was brief, intimate, perfect. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife again, Tristan cupped her face in his hands with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "This time," he said softly, "I do this right." And he kissed her, not the chaste, dutiful kiss that might have satisfied society at their first wedding. This was real deep and searching, and full of all the want he'd kept locked away for so long. Eveline melted into it, her hands fisting in his jacket, feeling his heart thunder against her palm. When they finally parted, both breathless, Mrs. Redley was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. "About time," she muttered, then caught herself. "Begging your pardon, Your Graces." They laughed, and the sound echoed through the small chapel like a blessing. That evening, as stars emerged over Blackthorne Hall, Evelyn stood with Tristan on the terrace overlooking the grounds, his arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Happy?" he murmured against her ear. Impossibly so. She leaned back into his warmth. Though I never imagined my life would turn out like this. Married to a cold duke in a house full of secrets? She turned in his arms to face him, married to a man who loves me enough to tear down every wall he ever built, living in a home that's finally starting to feel like one. Not so cold anymore? He asked, but she heard the vulnerability beneath the teasing. Not cold at all, she assured him, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. Just human, beautifully, perfectly human. He caught her hand and kissed her palm. I love you, Eveline Blackthorne. Not as a duty, not as a sacrifice, just because. Just because, she echoed, smiling. I think that might be the most romantic thing you've ever said. I'm working on it. Fair warning, you may be subjected to terrible poetry attempts in the near future. I look forward to it. They stood together as twilight deepened into night. Two people who'd found each other through scandal and secrets, through pride and pain, through all the messy complexity of real love. She had been meant to marry the Duke's younger brother, but destiny, it seemed, had other plans, better plans. As Tristan lowered his head to kiss her again, Eveline thought about the girl she'd been invisible, dutiful, easily forgotten. That girl had walked into Blackthorne House expecting a comfortable life with a charming man. Instead, she'd found a love that burned bright enough to melt even the coldest heart. And in doing so, she'd discovered the most important truth of all. Sometimes the best love stories don't begin with a choice. They begin with a challenge, and they're written by two people brave enough to choose each other every day after. If you're captivated by this unfolding tale of dukes, danger, and forbidden desires, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Every episode dives deeper into the secrets, betrayals, and whispered passions hidden within Blackthorne House, and you won't want to miss what comes next.